enjoyed the International Desert Conservation Summit thus far. We have 6 more presentations still, and we'll begin our second segment here with a presentation by Dr. Greg Rasmussen. Dr. Greg is the founder and executive director of the Painted Dog Research Trust based in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, of course, is in the southern part of Africa. And Dr. Greg will be talking to us about what is community benefit. Lessons learned from 3 decades of engaging communities and the development of a new, more holistic approach to conservation. Take it away.
Right. Hello again, everybody, and I'm delighted to be able to share with you 3 decades worth of community-based conservation. I say 3 decades worth because actually 3 decades ago, 33 years ago when I started, there was community-based conservation was an unknown word in field-based research. 30 years ago, there were probably no more than 200 painted dogs in Zimbabwe, and the situation was dire. My first study packs were wiped out by snares and by ranchers. They were shot by ranchers. And then another pack of mine was wiped out because the alpha male was hit by a car, and that meant that the pack didn't have a good hunting male in the pack, and the pups died. And so obviously it became aware to me that it was a community-based problem. And like, whilst, yes, we needed research to underpin what community-based conservation we were developing, people were the problem, and people still are the problem, basically. And so one of my first missions was, first, it turns out, to start developing an trust with communities. And that wasn't by going around with questionnaires. It was going out and meeting people, sitting down in villages, going with one of my field team and sharing with the community what our problems were. And, but also finding out what their problems were. Why were they snaring the painted dogs? What was their problem? What was their issue? And it turned out that they believed that the painted dogs were killing goats or would kill goats. And therefore they believed they were a problem. And so I realized that then we had to bring them together and we had to join hands. And I actually carried on with my research and demonstrated to the community that actually what they thought was killing the goats was not the painted dogs at all. It was hyenas, that's another problem. And yet they had engaged a poacher to kill dogs. Well, amazingly, because I developed so much trust, I managed to get this lovely poacher out of the woodwork and out of his trade, actually, well, certainly on painted dogs, because he'd been employed by the community to kill painted dogs to help them out with their problem that was non-existent. And interestingly, he became part of the solution because he would come with me in the field and then he would relay back to his community what he had seen, what we were doing, what we were about. But also he would help me find dens, and then I would employ him as a den guardian to protect the den. And instead of him maybe getting a few cents for killing dogs that weren't even killing livestock, he would actually, get a serious amount of money. One of the things that also was really apparent in early days, because community is not just rural communities. Community is children, really important. And it was always part of my work was to get through to the children, get through to their children who are ultimately, as we all know, are great ambassadors for getting through to their parents, which in many ways were also my target, because the children will grow up and we can make change. But also what's important in a conservation messaging, in my mind anyway, was always to deliver it in a way that was friendly, in a way that would come across. I never wanted to be seen as a stuffy scientist. Not that I probably could if I tried. But what was really important was that I wanted to bring conservation and the painted dog alive to people. And interestingly, one of my dreams in those early days, and I realized that, you know, when I used to do like a pre-questionnaire to the children about what did they know about conservation, what did they know about animal species, they really knew absolutely nothing. And I used to have this dog and pony show where I used to go around with my Land Rover. It used to actually be quite fun, my old Land Rover, and I would have a projector which I would run off the car battery. And normally by the end of the presentation, the car battery was dead, and all the kids would then push me out the door and push me in the sand to get me kick-started and fired again. But in those days, I realized that me doing, as I called it, my dog and pony show, it was important to get these children, how were they ever going to conserve painted dogs or wildlife? Because ultimately, painted dogs are just my flagship. You know, reality, everything is all connected, as we know. And I wanted them to have empathy. And my dream was to build a bush camp where children could learn and see nature for themselves for the very first time. And so I progressed along there, and some years later, I had my dream came true. And I actually have to share with you, I always felt it that I had a duty of debt to children to share nature. Why? Because as a child, a museum curator took me under wing, and that changed my life. And I felt, well, he changed my life and my perceptions. You know, I have a duty of debt to other children. And so hence, I developed a bush camp where kids come, a live-in bush camp, and I'm actually in the throes of building another live-in bush camp in another area, where the whole idea was that children wouldn't just come for a 2-hour, 3-hour voice pop and pushing my car out and thing. They would actually be going out on safari in the same way that the tourists would go. And they would then suddenly see nature in a completely different way. Some 3 years ago, having had a good 3 to 5 years ago, I decided I was going to move on again. And having founded Painted Dog Conservation, I then founded Painted Dog Research Trust with a slightly different spin on what I was going to be doing. And more importantly, I wanted to make sure that all the lessons I had learned were embraced in Painted Dog Research Trust. And in that was ultimately what I would call a new vision for conservation and community development. And the idea was that was going to be an all-embracing effort. More importantly, because I believe in science, conservation has to be driven on scientific arguments. And I had this vision that, you know, we would have a hub where young biologists and conservationists could come for scientific training and education. And to get them hands-on and get graduate students and young Zimbabweans excited and passionate about what I'm passionate for. And everyone kind of knows that I'm this rather eccentric. I'm absolutely passionate about fecal samples, because what I can get out of those 4 little jars from one poop is amazing. You know, we get genetics, we can get parasites, we can get stress hormones, we can find out what the dogs had for dinner. And my mission at this point is to get my students as inspired about poop as I can. And I honestly believe that if I can get my students as excited about feces as I am, I've got them for life, basically. Because ultimately, these students, these young girls young women that we see here, you know, they are the future. And just to give you an idea of the bigger landscape, where I am and where is Painted Dog Research Trust. Well, naturally, first thing is, I am part of CAZA, the Kavango Zambezi Transfrontier Park project. My study area is core in there. near Victoria Falls. And it's very exciting that the CASA's got five countries have come together to form probably one of the largest, well, certainly the largest potential African conservation landscape. Within that landscape, a number of us have been given jobs, like a dog with a job. And within CASA, we have a CASA Carnivore Coalition. And I've basically been given the hat to mitigate problems for all carnivores within my study area, which is joins Wangi National Park and the rest of CASA. And obviously, no good having one Wangi National Park if everything in between dies. And in fact, when we look at that map, this next map, you will see that this gray area here is solid community. And it's community, theoretically, community wildlife based, but this 10% of area is causing immense damage on the rest of the population. So understanding that means that we've really got to focus heavily on that 10% of the area. In that, what are our problems? At the moment, we've got snaring is one. And snaring now is we've no longer got snaring that is deliberate. Snaring is incidental snaring, so the bushmeat poachers. And so in terms of protecting the painted dogs, we're also developing programs such as anti-snare collars to protect individual packs and individual dogs from being snared. I now want to just go towards the nub of this presentation, which starts off with Cui Bono, because now I want to deliver a message that I think we all need to understand about community-based conservation. When we look at community-based conservation through what we call the lens of biological evolution, there's a fundamental thing. Cui Bono means who benefits. And what's important is that everyone benefits equally. And I'm going to share with you a very elegant experiment done by Frans de Waal, a famous primatologist, who was trying to understand the concept of fairness. And what we have to understand is some of what we feel as human beings is primal. And you're going to see that right now. So here we've got capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to let Frans de Waal lead the way just in a very short video clip. This is a hilarious clip, but more importantly, what is the underlying message? The two capuchin monkeys we saw there were paid unequally. So in essence, one would participate and one wasn't going to participate at all. And what that shows, even basically at a root directory level, that what I call fairness is in our genetic root directory. And that's really important. In fact, when we look critically at the things in life that make us the most angry, is when something's not fair. And intriguingly, in community-based conservation, one thing that I've seen very loud and clear is that if everyone isn't treated equally, people will not participate in conservation. Everyone in communities wants to grow. Everyone wants to develop. But the challenge in community-based conservation is to ensure what I call ensure cui bono. The challenge is that we have to develop a system that is fair not only to the environment, which is fair, good for conservation, i.e. whether it's conservation building or anything that we do that minimizes conservation footprint, but equally and very importantly, you've got to be sure that everyone in the community gets a fair share of the pie. So in other words, the real reality is that it's no good having a few members of the community doing really, really well when there are a number of members of the community getting absolutely nothing. And so in our conservation thinking, I always work on, my motto is that in community-based conservation, everyone must get a cucumber. And as long as everyone's getting a slice of the cake, then they're happy. And as soon as someone is excluded or as I say, not being treated fairly, they won't participate. So we're just going to share with you some projects, this is not exclusive, that we've developed. For example, we've developed water harvesting projects where everyone can participate. We provide the explosives. This is water harvesting where everyone can bring a rock, the families can get involved. We can break, the rocks are broken down to form quarry. The quarry quarry stone is turned into concrete. It becomes a family affair. And basically at the end of the day, we end up with a water pit that is not only good for water-based conservation, but it is also good for the aquatic communities. Just to give you some idea of this one single project, we had 68 families participating, netting $8,500, and we saved 15 metric tons of carbon dioxide. But you'll notice here that while we're building, we're not just employing one person, we're employing as many as we possibly can. And so rather than just have a few people benefiting, everyone benefits. And by developing what we call conservation-based building, 80% of all our construction costs go to the community. Other things we do are using thatch, because that's, again, it's a business where the women's, it's their domain and they wouldn't allow men to cut the grass. That's their annual income. So we use thatch a lot in all our buildings. We also get the snare wires, and we train artisans to convert snare wires into works of art that we can then sell for community-based conservation. Well, the other thing is, of course, it's not only painted dogs and community. There is another member of the community that I have a soft spot for, which of course are all the domestic dogs in the area. Now, this is my own bongo, but all are not so lucky. And so we assist with rounding up dogs, with the owner's permission, getting them spayed, getting them neutered, getting them taken care of. And we're also very busy in spreading the word with training. So training trainers to integrate conservation into their teachings. And again, building for the future. Just on a final note, as I say, this has to be a short presentation, but building for the future, to me, is investing in the human resources. And here, I want to share with you, here is a young woman whose teacher came to me and said, I've got this bright young girl, she's going to be pulled from school early, and she won't even be able to go to university. She won't even be able to do university qualifying exams. And I said, why? And he said, oh, well, she's a woman. That was basically what the teacher said. And sadly, the parents thought the same, the mother thought the same, the father wasn't there. I said, well, we can do something about that. I said, I've got a project for that. I didn't, but I made it up on the spot. And Losvita, her name is, we spoke to her mother, we covered all her education, and we We got her through to university qualifying level. We got her enrolled into university. She is now in her final year of a BSc, Bachelor of Science degree, and she is going to be the first woman ever in the Sazinda rural area of a population of some 2,000 to 3,000 people to go to university. Just to share with you, I'm very focused on trying to help women in conservation. And just to share with you, one of my students whose own words were that from a tender age, her passion was to be in the field of biological science and make a difference. And these are the young men and women that we are trying to help. Though I have to say, I am focusing very heavily on women because in conservation, I want to make a point here that we all know that conservation is a big problem and we cannot have 50% of the population trying to solve it. I would like to say thank you for your support and thank you very much for listening.
A wonderful presentation by Dr. Greg. It's really fantastic how thorough and thought-provoking and thoughtful your work has been. And I think joining us now live from his research station near Victoria Falls, Zimbabwe, Dr. Greg.
Hi, and I've got my anti-bug thing.
Yes,
We're
yes.
sweeping our bugs away as we go. They're not viruses either.
Yes, I think that we're having an entomological theme inadvertently with our first three presentations.
My geckos are happy though, because the bugs are all over the walls and they're happily munched.
Fantastic. So, Dr. Greg, we have many questions for you, and thank you for all the work that you've been doing in Zimbabwe and the inspiration that you bring to people who are concerned about painted dogs and also mesocarnivores in general across Southern Africa. You were one of the early innovators in the field, and it's a pleasure on our part to be able to partner with you. So
yes, well, it's good to be here.
It's great to have you. We've got a bunch of questions for you. The first one maybe is a simpler one. What has been the trajectory of painted dog numbers through time? So you had mentioned a number at the beginning. What are the painted dog numbers now?
We went from less than 200 to something around 750 in Zimbabwe.
That's amazing.
It takes a long time, but that's conservation, you know, and it was changing minds, you know, it was getting ranchers to stop shooting. I mean, we were basically, to my knowledge, it's the only country anywhere that painted dogs, the shooting stopped in 2000. And that's a long time ago. It took me 13 years of banging my head, you know, talking to ranchers positively and negatively. There was a bit of carrot and stick going on between us. And these were the almost like you might call them the rednecks in the States, or they have all sorts of, you know, and then the main thing was that people started to like the dog. We changed minds, you know. Initially it was like, oh, it was that vermin thing that only eats, you know, eats animals alive and all sorts of rubbish. And when we changed that, we through research, because I always, when I started my work, the one things I always said that every presentation I give, I wasn't going to give something I'd read about dogs from some book that someone else had written. There wasn't much. I decided that all I was ever going to say was what I knew about them, what I'd physically seen. And in fact, you've led me into a kind of a very early story that's incredibly impactful, and I never knew how impactful it was. And I used to just deliver it because it was fact. And one of my first study packs, they were called the Shamwari pack. And I was following them, and I used to basically live with the pack for about 28 days if I could. Often the pack would disappear. And on one tracking event, I suddenly heard a lion-dog interaction. And when I got into the bush, I could see one dog lying on the ground. He could hardly lift his head. And I'm like, he'd be mauled by a lion, basically. And I got a vet to the scene, and the vet said, this dog's as good as dead, and I don't know why you called me. And he said, oh, it's nature, which I argue anyway. Well, what is nature? And anyway, if an animal's suffering, you know, hey, come on, you know, if it's really gonna die, and we're absolutely sure it's gonna die, why do we have to let it go through the process? And the next day I came back, and the dog was missing. His name was Olna, and he was a 11-month-old pup, basically, and not a high-ranking painted dog. And the next day I came back, he was gone. There were drag marks. It looked like hyenas had dragged him away. And obviously I presumed he was dead. And I continued to follow this pack, and there were 11, and now there were 10. And then suddenly there was one dog in the pack, and the dog's name, I called him Circus because he had a big white C on his side. And Circus kept disappearing. Now, Circus didn't have a collar. I'm like, where is this dog going? And he was this dog's brother. And Circus would disappear. And then one day I'm like, I can't take this anymore. I've got to know where this dog's going. So I got a tracker, because when you track in twos, you know, on foot tracking. And I got a tracker in, and we tracked about 5 miles. And we got to a point, and lo and behold, I couldn't believe my eyes. There was Circus had just delivered a pile of meat for his brother, who wasn't dead. Oh. And he'd been going back every single day to feed that dog, his brother. Well, I just told that story in the early days, and I'm talking 1987, this was 1987, 1988. And when I told that, I had no idea how that was changing minds. The people were going, that's facts. That's real fact. That's not what we've heard about the dogs, and this is true. And people, even hardened ranchers, would say, I believe you because it's true. You can't have made up that story. You know, it was too bizarre to make it up. And that changed minds. And that's what conservation to me is all about. It's changing minds and developing empathy. And that's why obviously the children's program is so important.
So important. Absolutely. You know, you've talked about several ways that the community's attitudes, the community writ large, really at the country level, seems to be changing with respect to painted dogs, being more positive, being more receptive to the care of them, less likely to want to hunt them or harm them or blame them for things. Do you see that as a future trend that will even further expand because of the cui bono approach that you're using, with making certain that everybody benefits equally by the conservation work with painted dogs?
Yeah, I think it ultimately, you know, if you know, I have this philosophy that I'm not the only one I feel that has it, because I know there are other conservationists that feel the same. But my philosophy is that, you know, what people love, right, or understand, we will look after, or at least not hurt or harm. And if we don't understand something or dislike it, we will either harm it or ignore it. You know, and nature, we can't ignore it. And we can't harm it anymore. It's had enough.
It's true.
And you know, I mean, an interesting thing now is we you know, we've got a communal area where here we've got a number of people, you know, climate change, you mentioned it right at the beginning, you know, it's going to give us all a kick in the teeth. And we have to look for alternatives. We really do. And, you know, we're demonstrating on our property here that, you know, you can make areas beautiful again. You can make them attractive again. Now, whether it's attractive for wildlife or tourism or just you, you know, because the degraded human landscape. And we're getting people saying, well, my field is messed. Do you want to take it over? Or can we, I want my field to look like your field, the area that you took over 5 years ago. Because I feel that that's the way forward. Because clearly what we're doing now is a failed project, and climate changes, and we have to keep looking for different ways. And it's interesting, you know, of resilience. And it's interesting, just as an aside, because obviously you can't talk about anything these days without talking about COVID. And, you know, when COVID hit, exactly as it was with the black mambas. We've had exactly the same response, where tour operators absolutely dumped all their staff and said, "Oh, we'll see you 2 years later." You know, there's a tourism project that's in my own area, but if someone else is doing it, I don't need to own it, right? No, I've got enough to be getting on with, you know. And it was a woman's cooperative. Well, as soon as COVID hit, it's like, oh, goodbye. Well, you know, and this was 80 women were getting an income.
Yeah.
So we've already said, we've identified, and we said, well, we'll help, we'll pick that up as a conservation, we'll pick it up. Living Desert will buy all the product and everybody else. But it's a wonderful, it's most beautiful embroidery, you know, and it's, you know, and it's people getting livelihoods.
Yes.
Well, you know, they see the resilience, and we did exactly the same, you know, when COVID struck. You know, we help the community. Well, we can't feed you all, but hey, some cooking oil and some mealie meal goes a long way when you're starving.
That's very true. Yeah, Greg, I think, and I think we're going to have to close with that very inspirational number. But I think that your interest in building those alternative livelihoods, like the snare wire art, as well as the beading and the embroidery that you're talking about now developing in this current time, are so important. It helps bring that benefit back to the community, equally to the portion by their involvement in the project. So thank you very much for all the work that you've been doing, and the opportunity for us to get to support and work with you in a diversity of ways. You're a real treasured partner.
And thank you, and you are too. You do fantastic work. And just by the way, this is the product. Oh, you can't see it, can you? Our bumper stickers for our road traffic awareness campaign.
Fantastic.
We actually did our survey after of course you visited us.
Yes. Yeah, we were happy to help with the design and analysis of that data too. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, brilliant.
Thanks for joining us today.
Bye now.
All right, bye-bye. Bunch of really inspirational stories from Dr. Greg in Zimbabwe about how to work with communities to be able to conserve these otherwise persecuted and heavily endangered carnivores that are the Painted Dog Research Trust. So next.